Hello, and welcome to today's video. Today, I want to go through two of my favorite stool tests, and I'm going to walk you through why I like them, which is better in different contexts, depending on maybe where you're at in your healing journey, and what the different features of each of these tests are. Because if you can take a look at what the features are, it's going to help you decide which one is going to be better for you in your given circumstance. So I've had the opportunity to look at over 1,000 tests. It's probably closer to maybe like 2,000 or 3,000 different stool tests now, different individuals from different labs. And I've observed lots of trends, and I have a bit of a better idea what I'm looking at when I'm looking at a test, and what to look for, what tends to be interesting data that actually makes a difference to an individual's health presentation. And this has helped me determine which tests are actually helpful and which markers we want to be looking at. So I'm going to look at my two favorite tests. We're going to look at Biomesight, and we're also going to look at GI Map. We're going to take a look at both of these, and I'm going to break them down for you. We're going to have a look at the pros and cons of each, and hopefully help you figure out which one might be best for you right now in your given circumstance. I will say also that I do have a small affiliate commission with Biomesight. I don't have anything with GI Map, so I'm not just doing it for the money, because I'm also recommending a product that I don't make any money from. I will also say that I do use the small commission that I get from Biomesight to provide a little free service, free to you, which is that if you do any of these types of stool testing, if you do a GI Map, if you do a Biomesight, if you do anything like this, you can send it to my email. So you can email me at testing@williamdickinson.co.uk, and I'll give you a 5-minute review completely for free. The speed at which I deliver these reviews does vary a lot on my workload, because obviously I'm doing this as like a free little bonus thing, but I think it's really nice. It's a nice little personal touch, and it helps you get a little bit of extra value, because unfortunately I see a lot of people do spend thousands in testing, and then they come to me and no one's even explained what the test actually means or how to interpret it. So if I can do that for you, I'd really, really like to do that. So if you do have any stool testing you want me to review, send it to me, testing@williamdickinson.co.uk, and I'll give you a free 5-minute testing review. Like I said, there is a bit of a wait list, and the turnover depends on my workload, but I will get to you eventually. So let's take a look at Biomesight and GI Map. So here is a sample report from GI Map. I'm actually going to suggest that if you haven't done stool testing before, you start with a GI Map versus a Biomesight. And this gives me the opportunity to explain why. So GI Map, the main benefit that you're going to get from GI Map that you don't get from Biomesight is they have a section where they're looking at some of the digestive functions. So for example, they've got a lot of the stuff about your microbiome up here, all of this stuff about microbiome, and all over here you've got the core 4. So these are the ones that I always look for when I'm looking at someone's gut. I'm looking at the Bifidobacterium, Lactobacillus, Akkermansia, and Faecalibacteria. These are the 4 I'm always looking for, because anyone that has a gut problem, there's usually one of these 4. One of these 4 is out of balance. You've also got your Bacteroidetes and your Firmicutes ratio. But what's really, really interesting, the reason I really, really like GI Map, the specific purpose that I like it, is there are some intestinal health markers here. So these are functional measures of your digestive machinery. So you've got steatocrit, which is measuring your ability to digest and absorb fats. You've got elastase, which is a measure of your pancreatic enzyme function. You've got beta-glucuronidase, which is a detoxification marker. You have occult blood, which can show if you have any blood in your stool. That's quite important. You've got secretory IgA, which is part of your immune response. This is also really helpful to see what your body is doing in response to the dysbiosis that you might be presenting with. It also has the antigliadin IgA, which is a measure of your tolerance or your intolerance to gluten. Don't find this that helpful, but you also down here, you've got calprotectin, which is a marker of inflammation. And you have zonulin here, which is a measure of intestinal permeability. So your leaky gut, if you could measure it with a number, it would be this. So all of this data here, these intestinal health markers, you don't get with a Biomesight. And these things can be really, really helpful, especially if you're at the point where you feel really lost, or you've never done a stool test before and you want to collect a lot of data all in one go. This test is nice because it's telling you a lot about your microbiome, but also about the functions of your digestive system. How is your digestive machinery working? And this covers a good portion of your 5 pillars. So it doesn't measure your acid, but it does measure your bile, your digestive enzymes. Doesn't really measure your motility, but it does measure the mucosa, like the permeability with the zonulin. And it also tells us a lot about your microbiome as well. One other benefit of this is that it does also screen for pathogens a little bit better than the Biomesight does. So if you've got any of these pathogens up here, so this is like if you've got like traveler's diarrhea, or you like got food poisoning and you think maybe you have post-infectious IBS, or if you've traveled to lots of countries like South America or India or countries in Asia and you got food poisoning there, or you got sick with something, it might be worth doing a GI map just to see if you have any of these potentially pathogenic organisms, because the Biomesight doesn't really test for these. You look in really things like here, like your entomobia, your giardia. These can be really, really helpful things to know. And you've got your C. diff as well. So it's really nice because it screens this. It's really nice because it screens H. pylori. I probably should do a whole video on H. pylori. I'm not going to get into it today, but it measures it and it's in depth. You know, you've got all these different virulence factors, which is nice. And it does give you an idea about what's going on in your microbiome. Also down here, there is some information about your resistance of these microbes to different types of antibiotics. I'm generally not a fan of antibiotic treatment. It doesn't really, in my experience, help with like chronic digestive problems. Antibiotics generally not a very good idea because they end up creating a lot more problems than they solve. But it's nice because if you do have any of these organisms detected, it will show you which antibiotics could be helpful. It also measures Candida, which I don't believe the Biomesight does as well. So overall, I would say this gives you a little bit more of a snapshot with regards to the parasites. It tells you a little bit about the yeasts, and it gives you a bit more of a clue about the digestive functions. But overall, the information that it gives you about the actual microbiome itself, I would say is not quite as good as Biomesight. So if we then swap over to Biomesight, and I'm going to walk you through this sample report as well. I find that Biomesight, in my opinion, is a little bit more accurate. I will say that all stool testing kind of sucks. Like overall, stool testing is in its infancy. It's really not that accurate. And we literally know more about space than we know about the human microbiome. We hardly know anything. But overall, if you're looking at actually seeing what your microbiome composition is and seeing how it changes over time, I think Biomesight is a better option. First of all, it's more cost effective. So it doesn't cost as much, especially because they sell these like kits where you can buy, I think it's like 3 or 5 in one go. And that allows you to keep the price down and sort of measure how your microbiome is changing over time. I also, as I said, find it to be a little bit more accurate when it comes to actually measuring these microbes. So it does cover the big 4 that I'm always looking for. You've got your Akkermansia here, your Bifidobacterium here, you've got Blautia, and you've got Fecalibacterium. This is the 3rd one, and your Lactobacillus. So you're covering all of the big 4, the ones that I'm always trying to look for when I'm looking at someone's microbiome health. And look, you'll see here that the microbiome, this one is a bit depleted in Lactobacillus. The Fecalibacterium is in a pretty good range. The Bifidobacterium is always low. I've had maybe one or two clients in the last like 3 years or so that have markers in the yellow. Most people are in the red down here. Really low in Bifido. It's very common. Spike protein lowers Bifido. There's a lot of factors contributing to the really low Bifido that I don't think I've ever seen somebody up here in the green. It's super, super uncommon. And obviously I'm working with people that have chronic digestive issues. So all the people that do have a good range of Bifidobacterium, because it is so important, they're not the people that have the digestive problems, so they're not the people that I'm speaking to. But overall, I would trust the Biomesight's numbers more, especially when it comes to the big 4. One thing that I don't really like about the Biomesight is, for example, here in your Akkermansia, this technically is in the green. This is not marking this as a below range. There is really no red range here. Even if you're at basically 0, it still counts as green, and that can be a problem. And you'll also see here, for example, in the Fecalibacterium, there is no upper range where it becomes red. So I've had clients where they have 30 or 40% of their microbiome as Fecalibacteria prausnitzii, and that's actually a problem. It's showing an imbalance, but it doesn't mark it as being red. It doesn't sort of flag it, and it doesn't contribute to a reduction in the score up here in the diversity or the probiotics. It doesn't reduce the points. So overall, this gut wellness score, I don't know how accurate it actually is. I've had clients that have a score in the 50s and their microbiome is actually better than people who have a score in the 80s. So I think that they could probably do with a bit of work on tuning the gut wellness score to make it a little bit more accurate in representing how bad it actually is. So I wouldn't get too attached to the numbers, but overall, if you know what you're looking for and you're actually looking for understanding the microbiome and the microbiome changes over time, I would more specifically look at this Biomesight. Another thing I really like is they have recommendations, and this is probably my favorite thing about Biomesight. I'm going to skip all the way down to the bottom of the test here. Is they actually tell you some things that you can do that might help. And this is something that's missing in a lot of testing, is you do testing and you're like, wow, there's so much information that's completely useless to me because I don't understand what any of it means. And this is one reason I really like Biomesight, is that you come down here and they literally tell you what to do. So in essence, every time you have a certain marker, so let's for example, let's go with this one, this sulfibria. This is a hard one to say, but this is one of the organisms that's a sulfate reducing bacteria. It's very common if you have some sort of like toxic bile, very, very common. And down here, it has recommendations. So if this was a marker that was in the red, it would be suggesting it would add 1 tally to all of these, 1 tally to all of these, and 1 tally to all of these down here. And overall, the software then adds up how many times have you been recommended artichoke and how many times have you been discouraged from having artichoke. So if you've got 5 microbes in your gut that would benefit from having increased amounts of artichoke, but you've got 2 organisms that taking artichoke would actually make your dysbiosis worse, it'll give you a score of 3, where it's saying that overall the artichoke is like a 3. My general rule of thumb is if you can basically not pay too much attention to all of these specific suggestions in the area where it's, so for example, now on E. coli, it's saying you should have artichokes and beans and beetroot. I would generally ignore this and just come all the way to the bottom, and then they make a tally. And what I would do is all of these foods and options down here that are a number 4 or above, these are foods that you should try to include in your diet about 2 to 3 times a week. So for this, this is a sample test. This isn't a real test. This is like just an example. So for this individual, you would be looking at having artichokes, asparagus, banana, chickpeas, chicory, lentils, onions, cranberries, strawberries, and this aromatic vinegar to increase and have this 2 or 3 times a week. Anything that's a 2 or above, these are foods that are generally good and you should just enjoy having them in your diet. So pomegranate and apples and apricots and pinto beans. Overall, these are going to have a good effect on your microbiome. The key to microbiome diversity, as always, is dietary diversity. So it's not just getting focused on just really over-consuming these ones that are 4. These want to be a core part of the diet, but you also want to try and incorporate as much of these things as you're able. Now, one question I always get is, I'll do a consult with someone and they'll say, look, Biomesight is saying that I have to eat all of these foods that are 4s, but I can't eat artichokes, I can't eat asparagus, I can't eat bananas, I can't eat chickpeas, I can't eat chicory, I can't eat any of these foods. If that's the case, because you have food sensitivities like histamine intolerance or oxalate intolerance, or you're sensitive to the FODMAPs, just avoid them. Just use the ones in here that you are able to tolerate. So if you can't eat any of these, but you do completely fine with cranberries and strawberries, then add those, go with those, because they're going to still positively influence your microbiome. It's about using these tests in a way that's empowering and helpful and helps you refine your approach instead of defeating and making you feel like you can't heal because this is just showing you like how stuck you actually are. That's not the right way to use these kinds of tests. Also, you come down here and there's a recommendations with regards to prebiotics specifically. Now, if you're watching this video, you've probably already watched my step-by-step master probiotic guide. And in the end of that video, I mentioned doing microbiome testing to figure out what types of prebiotics might be a good option for you. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I would do something like a Biomesight test before we look at adding any prebiotics. And then we come down here and we look at these tallies. We look and we consider what is it that the microbiome is going to benefit most from. And you might be surprised because sometimes some of the substances in here aren't actually prebiotics. Like omega-3, for example, you wouldn't think, oh, omega-3 helps my microbiome. You might think, oh, it's good for inflammation or it's good for this. But this is showing us that there is data that correlates omega-3 with an improvement of this person's gut microbiome presentation. So this is why it's always nice. And again, you could come down here and say, well, I can't take lactulose. It makes me super bloated and gives me SIBO symptoms. I can't take galacto-oligosaccharides. Then don't take them, okay? Use the test to work for you. Maybe you can't do these, but you can do omega-3s, and maybe you've been doing omega-3s, and it's like, good job. You're on the right track. You're doing the right thing already, and now you also have data that proves it to you. And maybe you could do pectin, you know? Maybe you can't take pectin as a supplement. Maybe you take pectin and it makes you feel really bloated or makes you feel really uncomfortable. Then you can look at what foods are high in pectin. And usually, and we're going to scroll up and we're going to test my theory. Usually, if pectin is high down here in this prebiotics to add or continue, if we scroll up and look at the recommended foods, a lot of the recommended foods, especially the foods in that top list, tend to be foods that have a lot of pectin in. So let's have a look. So looking through here, just off the top of my head, which ones I know are high in pectin, we've got these foods here. apples and apricots. These foods naturally are very high in pectin. I'm sure there are probably others. I don't know it off the top of my head though. So it shows you that maybe you can't tolerate the pectin as a supplement, but you can tolerate apples in your diet and you can tolerate apricots. So you add those foods. This way we're using the data to help you orient your diet towards not just your diet, actually your diet and your supplements, because these are different types of prebiotics and supplements as well, towards helping you optimize your microbiome presentation and not getting stuck up and held up on all of the things that you can't actually do. And then there's some overall recommendations down here. I don't think these are very helpful. Like everyone knows that generally fiber is good for your microbiome. Everyone knows exercise is important. Everyone knows eat the rainbow and plant-based. Everyone, this is not really very, very helpful, you know, so not really that helpful. I wouldn't pay too much attention to these things down the bottom, but where you really get value in Biomesight is this food tally. So you see which foods could be really helpful for your microbiome and your prebiotics recommendations. I do think that they have probiotics as well. Yeah, they do. They have here as well. Almost always, what I see is Bifidobacterium is generally a good recommendation for everyone. And then going for more broad spectrum. So something like, again, you can follow my step-by-step master probiotic guide. I'll stick that up somewhere on the screen somewhere, and you can go and take a look at that if you don't know where to get started. You could look at doing the stool test first, but for most people, I find it's actually better to just start with some probiotics. A lot of the symptoms will go away, and then it also changes your microbiome presentation, and doing a stool test at that point tends to be much more valuable. You get much more insight out of it. But again, one of the reasons I was recommending that Biomesight is nice if you're going to do testing, let's say, for example, every 3 months over the course of a year, is you're going to see how these foods change. You're going to see how these overall recommendations change. And you might find that after you feed something for a long enough period of time, like for example, think about it like this. Imagine your microbiome needs a certain species of bacteria to detox a certain compound. So your body is using that microbe. Once you detox all of that organism, once you detox all of that substance, you don't really need that organism anymore. And the number will decrease, and you'll see that your need for the dietary foods that feed that organism also decrease. So your microbiome isn't just something that's kind of like stupid and we just throw foods at it to change. Your microbiome works with your body, and the needs of your body change over time as you go through your healing journey. So this is why it can be really nice to do one of these every 3 months, every 6 months. And that way you can track how is your microbiome changing over time, and how are the interventions that you are using influencing the composition of your microbiome over time. So I think it would be really nice now to just summarize the pros and cons to help you make a decision. So if you've never done a stool test before, probably you're going to get more value out of a GI map, just because it's going to show you your digestive health markers. You're going to get to look at your fat malabsorption, your inflammation in your gut, your pancreatic elastase, your immunoglobulin levels. That's really, really helpful. And you can also screen for all of those pathogens and parasites and things like that and rule those out. But if you have done that already, you already have an idea. Maybe you've already incorporated some digestive supports. Maybe you're like me and you know that you do really well with digestive enzymes, and you've got your Digest Gold, which are the exact ones that I recommend. Maybe you're on betaine HCl or ox bile. You've already found some good degree of digestive supports that are working for you, and you've seen the improvement in your food tolerance and your digestive health. You might find it better to do Biomesight or a series of Biomesight tests. So then we can focus on optimizing your microbiome. If you're experiencing symptoms that are more sort of like overtly digestive, as in functional issues like alterations in bowel habits, constipation, diarrhea, excessive like reflux, bloating, more of these digestive function problems, again, your GI map's probably better. If you've got a lot of these things under control with supplements, or you've managed to resolve them already, like for example, yes, I do still use my Digest Gold enzymes, and I find them really helpful with improving my tolerance to more dietary diversity, and they allow me to eat like proteins and starches together without any digestive issues. Like, so I still need this support, but I don't need anything like betaine HCl. I don't have any problems with animal products. I don't get any sensation of fullness. I can eat very large quantities of food and I don't get excessively full. My stomach acid is pretty strong now, and my tolerance for digesting fats is also really great. I've worked on my bioflow a lot, so I don't need these supports anymore. And if you reach that sort of point, it makes more sense to do Biomesight, and from here we're trying to improve the composition of your microbiome. Generally, the keys or the clues that you want to do this is got a lot of the functional digestive issues under control, but maybe you're dealing with something a bit like me, which is where you were exposed to lots of chronic toxicity for a long time and you had a multi-system collapse in your body. So for me, it was like a very long mold exposure. This caused complete immune dysfunction, histamine, mast cell issues, digestive collapse, immune system collapse. I basically had a lot of autoimmune problems. I was bedridden. I was disabled. I literally was on disability benefits in the United Kingdom. I was disabled. I had a full-time carer. If you're at that point and you've built up some stability, but you're looking at how can you improve your microbiome over time whilst you rebuild your immune function and whilst you try to mitigate or address the damage that is done from a chronic exposure to antibiotics, antimicrobial agents, toxins in your environment, then doing a series of biome sites, or even just doing one to really get a more accurate read of what your microbiome is actually doing, and then considering following up with additional biome sites in the future if you want. That way, you're going to get a better understanding of how your microbiome is changing over time. One thing that's really worth noting is if you are going to do a series, it is important to try and stay with the same software. If you do GI Map and then you do a biome site and then you do Vibrant and then you go back to GI Map and you keep swapping every single time, it's much harder to get an idea of what's going on because the companies use different processes. You're going to get completely variable results. It's very, very hard to track. So if you are going to do a GI map first and then transition to biome site, I think that's totally fine. But if you are going to consider doing testing in the long run, make sure you stick with one and you use it. If you've already done 5 GI maps and you already have all of that data, probably keep doing GI maps. If you're using another one, like I just mentioned, Vibrant also has quite a good stool test. It's more about what can you get in your area, what's accessible where you currently live. So if you've already been working with a provider and got a series of tests and you find that those tests are helpful and they're accurate and they're giving you results, it makes more sense to continue with those labs. And just some little hints, some tips that your microbiome might be causing some problems for you. And the microbiome is what needs more of the work versus the digestive functions would be if you're experiencing more chronic issues, and this tends to look like chronic immune system dysfunction. So if you've got like autoimmune problems or immune deficiency problems, where you've got like chronic infections, chronic Lyme, chronic viral things, working your microbiome is going to be more important. If you've had a really long chronic health history, again, working your microbiome could be more important. If you've got issues that feel functional, but they don't feel like they're functionally connected to the digestive system. So for example, like chronic brain fog, that's just chronic. And it's not connected to like how well you've slept or if you did exercise the day before. It doesn't seem to be connected to your hormones. If it's something like that, working your microbiome is really important. Chronic fatigue syndrome, something like that, working your microbiome, really, really important. So I know it's not an exact do this or do that. It's always context dependent. It always depends on your situation. It depends on what you're trying to achieve. There are a lot of variables. I'm hoping that taking a look at both of these tests has given you a snapshot, like some insight, and has helped you figure out why do we have these different tests? What are the different functions? What one might be better for you? But if you feel like you still need a little bit more clarity, or maybe you want to do some other testing, maybe stool testing isn't where you want to start. Maybe you're thinking about a hormone test, or you're thinking about ruling out mold exposure by doing a mycotoxin test or an organic acids test, or maybe it's something else entirely. If you're not sure what you're doing and you want a little bit of extra help from somebody that's just been through this journey themselves, I'd be really happy to offer you a consultation. So if you have any interest in that, please just reach out, shoot me an email. You can contact me at support@williamdickinson.co.uk, or you can go to my website. Again, it's just my name, William Dickinson, and you can reach out. I'm, as you can imagine, super friendly. You can imagine from my videos. I'm really here because I want to help you. And as I mentioned earlier, if you already have some stool testing and you'd like me to give you a quick 5-minute review, send it over to testing@williamdickinson.co.uk. Just title the email something like free testing review and I'll add you to the queue. It's first come, first serve, and I work through it. Usually we try to do testing reviews once a month, but that doesn't always happen. So if I've missed anything, if you have any questions, or if you've got some extra pointers, maybe you've done a different test, or maybe you've done one of these, or maybe you've done both. I'd be really interested, especially if you've done both. Leave a comment below and let me know what you think of each of them. How helpful have they been for you? Because you might be able to help some other people that are thinking about doing some stool testing, and you could help them get better value for money, which is really nice. When we're all healing together, it's really important that we're all looking out for each other and helping each other on the healing journey, because it's a pretty difficult journey. So that's everything for me today. Hope you found it helpful. Hope you found it interesting. And I'll take care and see you in the next one. Bye-bye.